Meterpreter, a crowd favorite for payloads. So we've talked about bind and reverse payloads, and now we're going to talk about Meterpreter. So Meterpreter again is going to be used in our gaining access, and then we're going to use that throughout the rest of our stages, our escalation of privileges, maintaining access, and covering our tracks and setting our backdoors. Now, what is Meterpreter? Meterpreter is a multifaceted payload that operates via a dynamic link library injection, so a DLL injection. And it's included as part of our Metasploit framework, which is that MSF that we're using inside Kali Linux. That's going to allow us to load it and attack onto a victim platform. The nice thing about Meterpreter is that it resides in volatile memory of the target and it leaves no traces on the hard drive. So it's difficult to detect when you're using conventional forensic techniques, which makes it great for us as an attacker, not so great for us if we're the defenders. The nice thing about Meterpreter is it uses DLL injection to get exploited processes, this get PID. Now what happens is it's going to actually hook the Windows 32 API load library, and by doing that it's going to change these lower level APIs inside of Windows to allow us to load the Met server DLL from memory. By keeping it all in memory, it keeps it out of the logs, it keeps it off the hard drive, it makes it very hard for the defenders to go back and find it afterwards. The other great thing we're going to find with Meterpreter is it just has loads of functionality for us. So when we set up Meterpreter, we're going to do this inside the Metasploit framework. So if we're inside the MSF console, we're going to do use exploit/multi-handler. We're going to set our payload, so set payload Windows/Meterpreter/reverse TCP. We're going to set our host and our port, so that's our Kali IP and whatever port we're going to use, 2541, 4444, 443, whatever it is. And then we're going to do our exploit. Now, once we've set our payload, our listening host, and listening port, we'll be able to receive a callback from our exploited host. Now once you get into Meterpreter, you're going to see there's a ton of different commands. Now I'm not going to show you all of them, but if you want to see them all, just type help or question mark once you get to a Meterpreter prompt. So background is going to move the current session to the background, and this is going to allow us to hack multiple boxes at once. So if I have a first exploited target, I can type background, set up a second attack, go after a second box, and then background that and go back to the first one. And I can go between multiple different targets at one time. This is very useful to be able to interact with background sessions. Sessions. If I type in sessions, I'll be able to see all the active sessions I have. So again, I can have 2, 3, 4 different targets online and have active connections with each of them and then switch between them. I can also kill those sessions, kill all of them, or kill specific sessions. So to do that, I'm going to use sessions-I and then the number, that's interact. So if I was going to interact with my first session, it'd be session-I1. Then if I wanted to go to the other one, I'd type background, sessions-I2, and that would get me to the second one. If I want to kill that connection, I would just type sessions-K1, and that would kill the connection to 1. If I want to kill all of them, it's sessions-K. So some other Meterpreter commands that are helpful: the help, the load, the migrate, and the quit. So when you type in help, you're going to get the list of all the commands that Meterpreter understands. This is useful when you're first starting out to start learning how Meterpreter works and what different things there are that you can do. These screenshots you're seeing now come from that help menu. Now, if we go into migrate, that's going to migrate our server from one process to another. Now when we talk about server, we're talking about the Meterpreter server. That's the connection that we have with our victim. So we're going to fork our Meterpreter into a different process. So for instance, if my attack went in through Internet Explorer, that tends to crash a lot. So I would want to migrate out of Internet Explorer into something more stable, like Explorer, which is the file system browser. You also can do this while you're doing your maintaining access and covering our tracks phases. We'll talk about that more later, to hide ourselves or to migrate into another process that might have better permissions that gives us higher level access. So here's an example of migrate. So you'll see up top we have some legitimate processes. We have WinLogon, LAS, Service Host, Explorer, and WAB32Res. Now, when I initially broke in, I'm going to break in using a calc program, a calculator program. So therefore, I'm now sitting in calc. Now, if I migrate, you're going to see that the calc is going to go away, but I'm going to maintain my access. And the way we do that is by doing migrate, and we'll migrate from the PID of 3028 into where I want to go, which might be the Explorer PID of 1064. Some other nice things that Meterpreter allows you to do is you can download and upload files. You can also get your working directories and figure out where you are. Some exploits you do are not going to give you the path name of where you are. So you're not going to see the C:/system32. You might just get a blank prompt. So by using printing the working directory, I'll be able to figure out where I am on the victim system. Now, the download and upload work just like they say. You type in download in a file name, and it will take that file from the victim and bring it to your local Kali machine. That way you can do that information gathering and be able to use that as part of your exploitation later on. Some other commands we have ARP and ifconfig and ipconfig and netstat and port forwarding and route. We're going to talk about more of these later on in other lectures as we start playing through some of these commands, but this is really just some of your networking commands that you have inside Meterpreter. Here's some additional commands that we have inside Meterpreter. We have clear EV. This is clearing your event log. This is useful during covering your tracks phase. We also can drop tokens or steal tokens so that we can start pretending that we're some other user on the system. So for instance, if I got onto a user box and the domain admin had also been on that box, I might be able to steal their token and impersonate them and start going around the network as if I was the domain admin. We can execute commands, we can get the PID so we know what process we're currently in, we can migrate into other processes, we can reboot the computer, we can revert ourselves back to the initial user we were. We can drop into a shell. Just typing shell will get us to the C prompt, for instance. There's lots of different things that we can do, and as you play with Meterpreter, you're going to get better and better at using it. So one of the things I really like with Meterpreter is that it comes with built-in keystroke capturing. So if I have gotten onto a user's machine, I can actually use keyscan start and start a keylogger on that machine. So if they start going into their bank accounts, their Facebook, their email, I start capturing all those keystrokes, the usernames, the passwords, the things that they're writing. And when I go ahead and do a keyscan dump, I'll be able to see that on my screen. Some other things that you can do here is you can actually do a screenshot. And by doing a screenshot, you can actually capture what's on their screen and see what they're seeing. And you'll get that as a ping image. And that'll be, again, on your local Kali machine, so you'll see what the victim is seeing. It allows you to see in our graphical user environment world what that user is seeing in their world. And so again, to use the keylogger, keyscan start starts your keylogging, keyscan stop stops your keylogging, keyscan dump shows you those keystrokes that have been captured. So here's just a quick example on the screen of what it will look like in Meterpreter. GetUID will tell me what I am, and in this case I want to be system. PS tells me the processes that are open, and I'll be able to see what processes are there. Migrate PID will migrate me from the current process I'm in, that Internet Explorer process or Calc process, into something like Explorer or System. GetUID, verify where you should be. I want to be the current user, because if I want to capture somebody's keystrokes, I have to be them. So I have to migrate into a user process to do that. And now I'll be able to see if I go on a notepad, start typing notepad on your victim box, and then do a keyscan dump, you'll be able to see all those keystrokes that you've had. You'll also see here that Meterpreter gives you the ability to actually access the webcam. You can record audio from the microphone of the webcam, you can see what webcams are available, and you can start taking snapshots from the webcam. So I can actually see the victim that I'm seeing through their computer. Now, ours is a virtual target, it doesn't have a webcam, so these will actually fail on you if you try it in our virtual lab. But in the real world, you can do this and start stealing pictures off of their camera. Another one is elevation commands. We talked about once we gain access, we want to migrate up to a higher user level. Well, one of the ways we do that is get system. It's just automated. You type get system, and on a Windows machine, it will elevate you up to a system level user, if it can. This works about 50% of the time, so it works pretty well and it's worth a shot. It will get you where you want to go most of the time. So some other ways that we can elevate our privileges is we can do a hash dump. Hash dump is actually going to dump the contents of the SAM database. And we'll talk more about the SAM database when we talk about elevation of privilege later, but it's the way that Windows stores its credentials. So if I can dump the SAM database, I get the encrypted hash of all the passwords, I can then break those hashes and figure out what the passwords are. I now have additional accesses. And then finally here at the bottom you'll see timestamp, and timestamp's really useful because as we go into our covering our tracks later, we'll use timestamp to actually change the time that files were accessed. A good use of this is if I go into a log file and edit a piece of that log, it's going to change the date and time to the time that I edited it. Now what I want to do is go back and timestamp it back to the last time it was actually touched, which might have been 3 or 4 weeks ago by the system administrator. And that way I can help cover my tracks further. We'll cover this again in the covering tracks lesson.